Welcome to this special edition of LOOPcast, where we cover all things faith, culture, and politics from a Catholic perspective. I'm joined today by Kate Howell. Her Twitter handle is at RCAnnaKate, and I'll put that in the show notes. Make sure you follow her. She has some great content, and she's known colloquially as Anna Kate who loved God late. She's a native of South Carolina and a convert to the Catholic faith from Episcopalianism. And she has two cats named Mocha and Rowan. They are headed to Steubenville, Ohio this fall, where she'll begin a Master of Arts in Theology at Franciscan University. So Anna Kate, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So June is here, and we are in the thick of Rainbow Pride Month, and you've been very open on social media and about your own struggles with same-sex attraction, and also about your deep love of God and the Catholic faith, which a lot of our culture tells us are two things that don't go together. So I was wondering if you could start off with us just telling us a little bit about your conversion story. You told me you converted to Catholicism, quote, very unexpectedly. So how did that go?
Person to find out.
Tell us about your conversion and how same-sex attraction has played into your relationship with the church and Jesus.
Certainly. So I converted from the Episcopal Church, which I'm choosing my words carefully here. Definitely growing up in the Episcopal Church, I never heard anything wrong with homosexual behavior. Gene Robinson, who you might know as I'm mixing him up with James Martin.
Easy mistake.
Gene Robinson, who was the first openly gay partnered Episcopal bishop. I believe I was 11 when he became, and it was a big deal. And
yeah, I'm from New Hampshire, so yeah, we were right there. Yep, my husband's family is Episcopalian. Yeah, it was a big deal.
All right, yeah, it was a big deal, and my home parish came down very much on the side of, well, you know, if he's a good bishop and he's good at his job, what business is it of ours? And who are we to judge him? I came out fairly young. I have same-sex attraction, obviously, as you said, and I came out fairly young to no resistance whatsoever from my family, school, or church community. It wasn't so much a celebration like it would be now. There wasn't, a gay straight alliance club or anything like that, but it was more like, okay, this is this person and this is her situation, and it's not really our place to have an opinion about that. And so I grew up in that environment. I have exclusively had romantic relationships with women. I entered into a same-sex marriage when I was 26, after a 3-year engagement. I am absolutely not going to speak ill of my ex-wife. She's a wonderful person. But we had just separated when I decided it was time for me to go to college. And my goal was to become an Episcopal priest.
Wow.
And the one box that wasn't checked was that I didn't have a bachelor's degree. The way seminary works in the Episcopal Church is you usually need a 4-year degree, but it can be in anything. I mean, it could be in underwater basket weaving. And then, because most people are ordained in their 40s or 50s, so very often they got that degree 20 years ago.
Got it.
The second change of life type of thing for them. And so I was actually considered very young, but I had started a bachelor's degree in my early 20s. I never finished it, and that was the one box that wasn't checked. And so I wanted to be sponsored by the Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina, and there was a particular parish that was going to help me. And because that parish is in Charlotte, Belmont Abbey College looked perfect because I was very Catholic in my sensibilities. I'm sure many Episcopalians are. I'm wearing long sleeves, but the giant tattoo of the Virgin of Guadalupe predates my conversion by 8 years. So Belmont Abbey College looked perfect. I could study theology, which is what I was interested in. And so I came there, very much with the desire to keep my head down, get my degree, and get out. And that did not happen. I thought I was going to become an Episcopal priest after I graduated, but as it turns out, I wasn't even going to be an Episcopalian. Have you ever heard that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans?
I have heard that saying.
That's going to be on my tombstone.
There you go.
And then God laughed. And so it was Easter Sunday, my sophomore year, and my academic advisor, who's this wonderfully sweet man from Milan and a very faithful man as well, asked me what my Easter plans were. And I said, well, I don't have any Easter plans. You know, my church, this is 2021, and my church in Charlotte wasn't open yet.
Shut down.
COVID. I think you had to make reservations or something. It was some rigmarole. And I was like, I don't know. I'm probably just going to sit at home, watch church on my computer and order pizza. I don't know. And he said, well, I mean, no, you're coming to my house and eating lunch. And, you know, he's from Italy. Feeding people is like compulsion. And so a giant cauldron of risotto and many hours of hanging out with them later. Somehow it became a weekly thing that I went over to their house and, oh, by the way, we know your church isn't open. We'd be glad to take you to Mass with us.
Wow.
No problem. So I started going to Queen of the Apostles, which is this beautiful little church with the most joyful people I've ever met in my life. And I loved it. And then I'd go hang out at my advisor's house. And there were times when his wife would take the kids somewhere, like to go shopping or to go to the park or whatever, and it would just be myself and my professor at the house. And that was when I should say his PhD is in moral theology. And that was when I started asking questions about why does the church teach this about this? Why does the church teach this about this? And some of them were things that I already agreed with the Catholic Church on, like transgender stuff, like abortion. I've been very, very pro-life my whole life.
Wow.
And you can thank my father for that, and who was an atheist, by the way. And so I started asking him questions. And one day I said, you know, I want to know about the church's teachings on same-sex marriage. And he was like, really? Do you want to do this? Like,
do you really want to know?
like my divorce had been finalized like a few days before, I think.
Wow.
And because it took us a long time to get it finalized, you have to wait a year, and we ended up having to wait 2, but based on the pandemic. But anyway, so I start talking to him about it. And again, I'm going to try to be very charitable to my previous denomination because there are some good people and some people I really respect there. But if you ask them about their stance on same-sex marriage, you're going to get a lot of feelings, a lot of welcome, a lot of inclusion, a lot of we can't hurt feelings. Because Jesus never hurt anyone's feelings, of course. And that's a cake.
Yeah.
Or if Jesus hurt someone's feelings, it was always the people in power.
That's right.
Yeah.
Stick it to the man.
Yes, exactly. I like to say I grew up with Martin Luther King Jesus. Who was, you know, a political radical who was just so darn nice that they killed him for it.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds familiar.
So, well, you have Episcopalians in your family.
I do.
And so we sat on the couch, and so I was expecting like a lot of feelings and things just on the other side, and I would just evaluate which feelings
matched your feelings.
Right, or made more sense. What I got was Aquinas and natural law, and I go,
wow.
And I'm a sophomore theology major. I'm ready to follow this. Like, this isn't over my head. I got the purpose of marriage, the purpose of the marital act, why does sex exist, and what is it for? And I'm sitting there thinking, this makes sense.
Wow.
And I didn't know that faith was something that was supposed to fit into a logical framework. Like I always describe being Catholic, it's almost like there's this grid and you can fit things into it. And that's not something like faith was just kind of a personal thing that shouldn't really be in the public square and is really your business, and you don't have to justify it to anybody. Right. But of course, you know, in the Bible, it says always be prepared to give the reason for your hope. And Episcopal apologetics aren't really a thing. But so at least not that I ever learned. And so I'm sitting there going, wow, this makes sense. And at one point I burst into tears, and my sweet professor, he was very, very gentle with me, but he was very clear. He was not shy about saying exactly what the church teaches and exactly why. Although he certainly did so without being crude and without being unkind. But he was never ambiguous either. And at one point I started to cry, and he said, "Oh, Anna Kate, I'm so sorry. Was I not gentle enough? Like, did I say something that was over the line?" And I said, No, you were great. I'm not upset about that. I'm upset because I think I'm wrong.
Wow. That's a very humble thing to say.
Yeah, it was not fun for me. And so,
wow,
I went home and had a crisis about it. So I'm like, okay, you know, I know some Episcopalians who oppose same-sex marriage. I know an Episcopal priest or two who very quietly opposes same-sex marriage, and I'm already going to get crucified for the trans stuff and the pro-life stuff. Like, right. You know, I could be an Episcopal priest who opposes same-sex marriage. I would just refuse to perform one, which I will say they do have that liberty. Yes. Any priest can say no to any marriage for any reason. And that started out with priests who didn't want to marry divorced people, and now it's mostly about same-sex marriage. But in any case, I'm like, okay, you know, I do have that liberty. I think it's going to be okay. And I had more and more conversations with my professor, who was born Catholic and grew up in Italy, like the most Catholic place in the world, and with his wife, who was born not very religious and converted. And his wife gave me this advice, se sono rose fiorirani, which means if they're roses, they'll bloom. In other words, don't force it and don't run away from it. Just let it happen if it's to happen. And I told them a few weeks later that I'd had a conversation with my priest that I was not ready to move forward with anything related to aspirancy or ordination, because I needed to do some soul searching, and I needed to spend some time in the Catholic Church, and I needed to make sure, and I thought this was going to be the outcome, I needed to make sure that I really wanted to be an Episcopalian, and there was no way to know that if I didn't explore this other option. My priest said, absolutely. I mean, he was wonderful. Father Jacob was wonderful. He said, absolutely, do what you need to do. We'll be here. You know, we got you. We'll pray for you. Thank you, Father Jacob. And so I kept going to church with my advisor and his family, and having these conversations with him. And then school started again, and I was having these conversations with other students. At one point during the summer, I broke my ankle, and there was, talk about humbling, and there was no one available who could come get me from the hospital. And so I didn't know who to call. So I called campus ministry. And I get a hold of the campus minister, and I'm like, look, this is really stupid, but I broke my ankle. I'm in the hospital in Gastonia. I live in Belmont. Is there any way you could get me home? And he said, sure, but I'm going to bring someone from student affairs with me who has a bigger car, so we can kind of get y'all stretched out and comfortable. So they had to help me get up the stairs to my apartment. And during that time, when we were sitting on the stairs taking a break, I said, hey, Wesley, what about RCIA? Can you tell me about that? And he's like, well, we start after Labor Day, we go through the fall semester, and then we'll start again in the spring and go through Easter, and here's what we'll do, and here's what we'll talk about. Are you interested? I opened my mouth to say no, and I said yes. And God laughed.
That's right. And God laughed hard.
So I started RCIA, and I was talking to other students and to other people in my life, and, you know, all my friends at school, the rest of the theology department, they're all Catholic. My best friend had just joined the monastery. Like, these are some Catholic people.
Yeah, they're committed.
So I'm talking to them, I'm talking to Brother Chrysostom, to my teachers about it, and it's just becoming more and more clear that this might actually happen.
Mhm.
And I was sitting on a bench outside of the main academic building one day. It was September of 2021, and my Italian teacher came and sat down next to me. And my Italian teacher is the most wonderful person in the world. Not my professor from Italy. The teacher who was teaching me Italian is from California. It's very confusing.
That's all good.
She came and sat down next to me, and we had a conversation, and I cannot remember for the life of me the content of that conversation. By the end of it, I knew I was going to be Catholic.
Wow.
And so I told her the next day after class, I've made this decision, and her first question was, can I sponsor you?
Wow.
So I said, absolutely. So she's my madrina, she's my godmother, and I love her so very much. And she's given me a lot of the, well, let's just say she didn't raise a timid Catholic. So a lot of this advocacy and stuff, this sort of boldness for the faith, I learned from her.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it became clear I didn't need to be an RCIA because I was a junior theology major and I was bored out of my skull. I probably could have taught RCIA at that point. Not as well as they were teaching it, but I could have put something together. And they were just these terrible videos. And the RCIA teacher and all of the theology professors petitioned the abbot to get me out of RCIA.
Please confirm her so she can stop leading this class.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or so she can stop sitting in the back of this class doing her homework because because this is the Bible and it has an Old Testament and a New Testament.
Yeah.
And so
we're a little beyond that.
I was not digging RCIA, and I'd complained about it enough that everybody was trying to get me out of it. And like the persistent widow.
There's a biblical precedent for that.
The parable of Anna Kate whining herself out of RCIA. And so the abbot said, fine, she doesn't have to do RCIA if it's driving her crazy and she's driving everyone else crazy. But she does need to meet with a monastery priest once for an hour during the school year until she's confirmed. Fine. My advisor pointed out at that point that there was an existing relationship with Father Elias, who's one of the abbey priests, and Abbot Placid said, great, she'll meet with Father Elias. Father Elias is going to be a saint one day, and he's probably the holiest person I've ever met. And we met every week. We had a great time. We kind of did everything at my pace. He sort of evaluated what I knew and didn't know. And it came around to the subject of my first confession, because I'm a baptized Christian, which means that I was going to have to make a first confession.
Right.
Apparently, if you're not baptized, then just baptism takes care of it.
Yeah, wipes it all away.
Yeah, no, I'd been wiped and I'd screwed that up. So I had to go. I've apparently committed a lot of sins since I was 4 months old. Go figure.
Yeah, I think we all have.
I said, Father Elias, I have to do this thing. And confession is hard for converts because it's the one sacrament you'll never see someone else receive. Like you might go to a wedding, you might go to a baptism.
Right.
There with granny or grandpa when they get their last rites, ordinations. But you'll never see someone else make a confession.
Right. That's a really interesting point.
And I was really nervous about that. So Father got out literally like the piece of paper and said, these are the exact words I will say. These are the exact words you will say. I'll show you the inside of the confessional. You can sit in a chair. We'll turn the lights on. I'm hard of hearing and needed to read lips. We'll turn the lights on so you can see me. I'll have you bring a water bottle. It'll be fine. So precious man. So I started making my list. Because when you're 30, you have a list.
Yeah.
And most of them were embarrassing. And I'm like, can I really say this word in front of a priest?
Yes.
Are you sure? Just did.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that, and I was getting really nervous about my first confession.
Yeah.
I was to the point where I was having like nightmares
Wow.
and getting sick to my stomach. And the night before, I was supposed to make my first confession on a Thursday. I remember because I prayed the Luminous Mysteries right before I went in. So I made my first confession on Thursday. Wednesday night, I was just beset with terror. Like, and this awful I mean, it had to have been demonic. And this awful feeling that I had was like, you're too bad for this to work.
Yeah.
Like, this is for, garden variety sins. But no one as bad as you. I mean, they'd have to bring in whatever the Vatican Navy SEALs are, and possibly the Pope himself, for like how bad your sins are. Turns out there are some sins only the Pope can forgive, but I've never committed any of them.
There you go. That's comforting.
And so I'm sitting there just like physically unable to breathe.
Wow.
And I remember saying out loud, God, if I do this tomorrow and it works, like if I'm really able to be forgiven and really able to leave this 4-page Google document worth of sins in that confessional, I promise I will never shut up about it. Like, I will never stop telling what you set me free from if you can really set me free.
I'm gonna cry. Oh my gosh.
And I'd been having these nightmares. I'd been having this nightmare about, and I've never even seen The Passion, but somehow I'm having this very like graphic nightmare about the nail being driven into our Lord's hand, and I felt like that nail was me. And so I get to the basilica. The basilica's right on campus, so I literally walked over from my class. I couldn't eat, couldn't do anything. I was so stressed out, so I just went to go pray in the basilica. And I knew my godmother had a class, but I texted her. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go pray before my confession, and wish me luck. I know you've got class. I'll tell you all about it after." And I get like a thumbs up emoji. And so I'm like, okay, she's totally teaching. So I sit in the pew and I get my rosary out, and that I can't breathe horrible feeling starts again.
Wow.
I start to get panic and I start to hyperventilate and I'm just losing it. And I felt like somebody was next to me, and I'm like, that's weird. And I open my eyes, and my godmother had canceled her class, her seminary Latin class, to come be with me. And she said, "Okay, what decade were you?" She got me to breathe. She kind of rubbed my back, got me to breathe. And she said, "Okay, what decade were you on?" And I'm like, the Apostles' Creed.
I didn't even make it past the crucifix.
I think I got to one God.
Yeah.
And she said, "That's a perfect place to start. Come here." And we made the sign of the cross, and I kind of laid my head on her shoulder, and she had her arms around me, and she put her veil on and straightened mine because it was all cattywampus, and we prayed, like I said, the Luminous Mysteries together. And by the end of it, I had this realization. I thought, wait, the nail's not me, it's my sin. And I'm about to be separated from my sin.
Wow.
And I went in and I made my confession. It took like an hour. We had to have some cry breaks and some water. And luckily, like, he encouraged me to bring a water bottle.
Yep.
And he brought Kleenex. And at the end, he blessed a medal of St. Benedict and gave it to me.
Wow.
And said, "Please always remember that you can come back. That our Lord's always waiting for you here in the confessional."
Wow.
And whether it's me or Father David or the abbot or Father Christopher, whoever it may be, you're always safe here.
It's always Jesus.
Yeah, it's always Jesus, and you can always be forgiven.
Wow.
And see, I hadn't told him I was struggling with thoughts of not being able to be forgiven. But when he said, "Remember, you can always be forgiven," no sin is too small or too big to bring before our Lord. And I'm sitting there like, okay, that's coming straight from Jesus, but okay.
Yep.
And then I realized, okay, I made a promise.
And now you can't shut up about it.
I know. I'm I actually mentioned that my academic advisor, is from Milan.
Mhm.
During my senior thesis, I quoted Augustine heavily because I am Anna Kate who loved God late. Late
Mhm.
about you, beauty so ancient and so new.
Yes.
That's
Oh, perfect. On the tattoo. Yep.
I got that a week before my confirmation.
That's
And it's in
awesome.
Latin because my godmother is my Italian teacher, but she's a Latin teacher.
So you've got Our Lady of Guadalupe on one arm,
Our Lady of Guadalupe,
pre-conversion. Oh, and Sacred Heart. That's awesome.
If they're roses, they'll bloom. So I've got a rose.
That's awesome.
So yeah, a lot of
Saint Augustine.
Yeah, exactly. And so I love Saint Augustine, and all my friends. It's kind of a joke how much I love Saint Augustine. And during my thesis, I was going to quote Augustine heavily because it's my thesis. That's why. And Confessions is it's my jam. I heard somebody talk about their conversion story as having their wig snatched by Dante. I had my wig snatched by Augustine. So during my thesis, I said something like, I was going to talk about Augustine's Confessions because my thesis is on suffering, and I was going to talk about Augustine and his Confessions, and I said, I'm sure his story is familiar to all of you, but in case it's not, let me give you the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah.
So there's this brilliant, promising young person, great speaker, great writer, just all the potential in the world, weighed down by this horrible problem of sexual sin. And he leaves home, and he meets this brilliant teacher from Milan, and he converts to Catholicism at age 30, and he never shuts up about it again. Took a deep breath. This, of course, bears no resemblance to anyone's situation in this room. And I hit my slide, and the next line said, just add cats and tattoos.
Yeah.
So Augustine is my dude.
He's amazing. And that's an amazing story.
Yeah, so I know that was my senior thesis. That was just like a couple months ago. But yeah, Augustine's had a huge impact on my story as well. And I actually took the class where we read the Confessions,
right,
like the first semester of my junior year. So the semester I was deciding whether I wanted to convert or not.
Wow,
and
perfect.
that night of you just did me in.
God's timing, right? Yeah, late have I loved you, beauty. Oh, so beautiful. Yeah.
So I decided, now I have to do something with this because I've been forgiven, and all I could think in my head was this verse, John 8:36. For if the Son has made you free, then you will be free indeed. And I kind of became active on Catholic Twitter at this point, and became aware of some issues. Right. Especially around the way that we talk about same-sex attraction. There are basically, so I sucked at my philosophy classes, but I will never be able to tell you the difference between form and matter. It's just not going to happen. It's just, I did invent substantial accidents on a test once.
Interesting.
I think I meant proper accidents, or at least my teacher does. But anyway, one thing I do remember is in my ethics class that virtue always lies between two extremes.
Yes.
And so we have this very uncharitable, very unkind, it's a choice. No, it isn't. You can change your attraction. No, you can't. The attraction itself is a sin. No, it isn't.
No, it's not.
All these things the church does not teach. I mean, it sounds very Southern Baptist almost, like
very Protestant. Yeah,
some kind of camp and get your attraction changed. And I'm like, no, I don't. In fact, that's abuse. And then on the other end, we have, does the church really teach that there's anything wrong? Who am I to judge? Like,
right. The Father James Martin end of things.
So familiar and
right,
not in a good way. Sometimes I read things and I'm like, I could swear that the abbot put that oil on my forehead and said I wasn't an Episcopalian anymore, but here we are.
Yes.
Just again, very familiar talking points, and I would argue that they're equally uncharitable, because to love someone is to will their ultimate eternal good. I think that in today's society, when we talk about love, we mean affirmation. And affirmation of something that's bad is called enabling, and that is diametrically opposed to love.
Absolutely.
And so I realize we have these two extremes of people who are just horribly wrong of what the church teaches, about what the church teaches, and the right answer is somewhere in the middle. And I think that anyone who's being honest about what the church teaches can tell you what the negatives are, what the thou shalt nots are, if you have same-sex attraction. As far as what the positives are, what you should be doing, what your life should look like, I think that's what I want to dedicate some of my graduate work to. I think that maybe I need to be the theologian who explores that a little bit. I don't know.
What would authentic Catholic accompaniment, that's like a big word, right? Accompaniment. What would that actually look like?
I just want to retire both of those words.
Yeah, it's been so hijacked, right?
Until they stop meaning affirm sin.
Right, exactly.
Because that's not what accompanying someone in true Catholicism, in true Christian love means. You cannot affirm sin.
Right. I think I wanted to read one of these tweets that you sent out. You wrote, quote, This was a really interesting one, though, because you wrote, quote, if you support James Martin and his ministry, Outreach, which CatholicVote's currently doing an expose on, so stay tuned for that. But if you support James Martin and his ministry, you are supporting the celebration of sin and the damnation of the very souls you claim to feel compassion for and want to accompany. It's that simple. Repent. And I think your personal witness, Anna Kate, is so important because I think often, Catholics will say something like, well, if we're talking to someone who's in that LGBT space or like has same-sex attraction, we shouldn't start with, here's what the church teaches. But it sounds like that was almost the vehicle through which Christ broke through to you, was the authentic teaching about this part of your life that had been affirmed up until that point.
Yeah. When I realized that the case against same-sex marriage that the church was making was not rooted in... Okay, so when you grow up in this affirming space, you're not only taught these are the correct views, you're also inoculated against the quote incorrect views. It's
not neutral.
It's not just, of course, being gay is okay. It's not just, of course, you should marry Meghan or you should marry whoever it is. It's anyone who tells you otherwise hates you and probably wants you dead. And it is sinful to hold those views. And you're not following Christ.
Yeah.
You've misunderstood the message and the person of Christ if you hold those hateful, mean views.
So when you had this conversation with your professor, did that like come back to you emotionally at all? And you were like, oh my gosh, he hates me, or why was that?
So I had come to a place, and this will put you, it's not PC to say as an Episcopalian, but my belief was same-sex marriage is permissible. Love is love. All marriages between consenting adults that aren't, outwardly abusive or whatever are equal. But it's not sinful to think otherwise. It's not hateful to think otherwise. You're not a bad person if you think.
So you'd already come to that.
That's not something I could widely verbalize, I think, and still be ordainable. But I had priests in my life, I had priests in my life who were very faithful. I'm thinking of one in particular who were very, very faithful Episcopal priests who loved the church, who loved God, who loved me, and who loved Megan, my ex-wife, and who did not affirm same-sex marriage.
Wow.
And it was those experiences with people like Mother Mia and other priests who could hold those two things, who very clearly loved me, and were there for me in very difficult times, who very clearly loved Megan and certainly did not affirm her parents' choice to disown her for her sexuality. Yeah, it was a bad situation. I to this day think that was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time did not hold that was a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had seen enough of that I was willing to say a person can disagree with me on this issue and not hate me.
Wow.
I also very much knew that my advisor loved me. And we're very close in age, and we kind of have a similar sense of humor, and we got really close that summer.
Right.
And yeah, no, he was being so tender with me. Again, very clear, but very kind. And no, I was not struggling with that at the time. I didn't feel like anyone hated me. If anything, it was more they misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. I think it's beautiful how in your story, we talk a lot about, conversion and evangelization and how it has to start with a personal relationship, that there has to be that person to person, that conviction that this person loves me, no matter who I am or where I'm coming from. And then that allows us to communicate truth to them in a non-threatening way, in a non-judgmental way, where we can make it clear that, look, your behavior is destroying you. Your lifestyle is harming you, and your relationship with God is in jeopardy for all eternity. And that's coming from a place of love because of that personal witness that you've already experienced.
Right.
And I love your story because your professor, your godmother, that's so clearly how they reached out to you, or how God used them, right, as a personal relationship.
Absolutely. And I think that when we are doing advocacy, making statements, speaking the truth in spaces like Twitter, we also need to be praying for people in those people's lives. Like, we need to be praying, because I can't be that person sitting in the living room having this conversation with everyone on Twitter. I can maybe make them want to ask questions, but I can't be that one-on-one person for everyone. And so I think it's so important that when you are arguing with or debating or helping explain things to someone on Twitter, you also need to be praying for people in that person's real life, or maybe even people they're close to online, who then take those questions to.
That's a great point. Yeah, that Twitter's not it's sort of like a spark maybe, or it's not the fire itself. We have to be waging that spiritual warfare, that aspect, as well as using our minds and our writing talents.
Well, and we should always sow, and we should never expect to reap, or at least never feel entitled to do so. Like, if I'm the person that plants that seed in someone's mind, or that spark, as you said, may it please God, I may be the person who gets to see the fruit in that person's life, but I'm not entitled to that. Like, it's not something that I should expect to get out of it. I mean, there were many, when I was, a very outspoken Anglican on Twitter, there were a lot of Catholics I got into it with over same-sex marriage coming from the other side. And, I blocked most of them. They didn't see me convert. They probably don't know that I've converted. They're just some jerk, and I was just some jerk. And, I'm not saying be a jerk, but
the communion of jerks, is that what this is?
Don't be discouraged.
Yeah.
Because you may reap and not sow.
Yeah. That's so important to remember.
And so the tweet that I first got in trouble for, it was late May, like May 20 something. And someone sent me a private message, someone I hadn't really communicated with much before. And they said, Anna Kate, I need your opinion on something. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I mean, I have more opinions than anyone else on the planet. I'm here for you. And she said, I feel demoralized, I feel discouraged, I feel this sense of despair with Pride Month coming up, because I feel like all we as Catholics can really do is sit and watch the nonsense and watch, the blasphemy and the sin and debauchery, and I just feel like I'm just kind of sitting here like, what do I do? What can I do to...
Yeah.
And I said, that's a really good question. Can you give me some time to think about it? And a day or two later, I posted what's now my pinned tweet of things that Catholics who feel like they can't do anything can do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started with the obvious answer, which is to pray. I don't think there's ever been a wasted prayer in history.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think prayer is something that's just up there in the ether. I think that God uses it to do real things in the world. And so pray, pray for people living chastely with same-sex attraction. Pray for people like Father James Martin and the people he's leading astray. Pray for just our culture. Pray for the world. I mean, look how widespread this mess is.
Right.
And pray for yourself. Pray to feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, when we see things like pride masses, when we see things like, clearly anti-Catholic events taking place in Catholic spaces, we have to get that shut down.
Right.
And I don't know if you know about the one in Pittsburgh.
Yes. Yeah.
That I mobilized my Twitter people and said, let's go, let's do something.
Yeah, the bishop has to stop this.
And I provided them with the very simple, you just put your name and email address in a comment form. Because if you want someone to do something, you have to give them a script, or you have to give
them... Make it easy.
You can't just say, you go find this person's contact information and you figure out what to say, because frankly, I don't do things like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll pray for you. I'm not about to go look up this.
Right. I say Hail Mary and I'm done. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I'm like, no, like, this is the link you click. These are some things you could say. This will get you directly to the bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out the bishop did not know about the Pride Mass. It had been planned without his knowledge and without his consent.
Right.
And he had received tons and tons of inquiries about it, and wrote a very pastoral, I thought very gentle, but again, very clear about what is and isn't acceptable letter about, look, I didn't know about this. This is unacceptable. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And I was like, hey, if there's
something changed.
If there's any other event that you guys see that is happening, let me know and I'll try to round up some people to deal with it. We can call whoever's office, we can write in, we can make our voice heard. And I think one person sending an email may not matter, but 50 does, and 100 does, and 500 does. And at the very least, even if they're going to continue with whatever the thing is, they cannot say, well, this is what people want, or this is how people feel, or what people support.
Nobody cares, right?
They've got 50 or 100 or 500 things sitting in their inbox that say otherwise.
That's awesome. Yeah, really simple.
Yeah, and I was like, you could also maybe go to a drag queen event and just quietly pray a rosary in the back, or go stand on the sidewalk during Pride and quietly pray a rosary. Please do not hold a Bible and scream at people.
Yeah.
Do not be disruptive. That's exactly the narrative they want.
They want
That's exactly the story the local newspaper wants to print, is that some Catholic was out there acting like a you-know-what and ruining Pride for all these people, but standing there quietly praying a rosary, I think would be a visual contrast both to the parade itself and to the people who are holding Bibles and screaming.
Right.
Because those are the two extremes, and we want the mean.
I love too that during June we have so many Eucharistic processions throughout the country for Corpus Christi.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a contrast. Like when our parish marches through New Haven in Connecticut, it's joyful. There are children. There's beautiful singing, beautiful images versus the Pride Parade, which is like, yeah, right.
Wearing clothes.
People are wearing clothing. It helps, right? Nobody's like spanking anyone, and it's much more. It's just a beautiful, happy thing instead of this angry ugliness. That's a perversion.
Non-spanking Corpus Christi policy.
No, none of those. Yeah, I think I talk about getting shut down. But anyway, it's a beautiful contrast. Well, I could.
So what about I don't know. What do you think are the next steps? As far as Martin, like what do you think?
Right. I mean, I think as far as Father James Martin, he's a strange case because he is a priest who's religious. And so in the Archdiocese of New York, where he is in residence, the bishops or the archbishops have historically wanted to keep their hands out of it. I think he is towing the line closer and closer to the unacceptable, where, as he pushes, especially in the last, comparing devotion to the Sacred Heart to waving a rainbow flag, that's getting closer and closer to the line. But Father James Martin is, and a lot of...
very smart.
He's very smart, right?
He knows exactly where the line is between weaponized ambiguity and outright defiance.
Exactly. And, any given tweet of his, there's nothing wrong with it in isolation. Right. He'll just repost something without a comment, or he'll say something like, I believe in compassion, and post an article about trans surgery for children. And you're just, you know what he's saying, but he hasn't actually said the quiet part out loud yet. And
right. He seems to be getting close. I think
he's getting closer.
It's so easy on Twitter to accidentally go too far.
Mm-hmm.
And it may happen. Will the powers that be care? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he seems pretty well protected at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I think that...
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that we continue to call him out as faithful laity. Faithful priests speak out against him. And it's not for his sake so much. And, we pray, of course, for his conversion and the salvation.
In heaven.
I know. I want to be sitting with him at the heavenly banquet, and that can happen. But in the meantime, we do it for the sake of Catholics who are deceived and the Catholics who are confused by him, continue to speak the truth. So that's the next step for us anyway. But
I recently told someone the story about my first confession and about my promise to God.
Yeah.
And they asked me, what do you think that vocation is going to look like for you? And I said, do you know who James Martin is? And the person said, yeah, I do. I said, I want to do what he's doing, but I want to do it right.
That's awesome.
Because I think I think he's horribly misguided. I think that he's absolutely leading people to perdition. I think there's no question about that. But I think that all of this comes from A, a compassion toward people with same-sex attraction, and B, a desire to find that positive, that place for them in the church. And for a group that historically hasn't really had a place in the church. And he's going about it absolutely wrong. He's, afoul of church teachings, at least in spirit, if not in word. And he's writing these terrible books and giving these terrible talks. I want to do what he is doing, which is act out of compassion toward same-sex attracted people with an eye toward finding our place in the church. But I want to do it right. So, if somebody asks me what I want to do with my life, I want to be a college professor. I'd like to, have various plans, but the core of it is I want to do what James Martin is doing, and I want to do it right.
Awesome. We need it.
I want to be the voice that rises up in the middle over the affirmers and enablers and over the people who are way to the right of what the church is teaching. And I want to be the person who figures out what a faithful, holy, chaste, good life in the church can look like with same-sex attraction without lying to people.
That's beautiful.
Without telling them either you can change your attraction itself is a sin, or any of these other lies from the right, or the lies from the left about, you don't need to change your behavior. And you'll notice I tend to use the term same-sex attraction. I'm not really big on calling myself gay. I will sometimes say shorthand, but the most important thing to me, the reason I don't love the word homosexual or gay, is because you don't know if you're describing a person, a disposition, or an act.
Right.
Those are three. When you say someone is gay, you're mixing those three things.
Right.
And you're really looking at three separate issues, or connected but separate issues, which is, number one, you have the person. This person is made in the image and likeness of God. This person is loved by God. Jesus died for this person. You cannot exclude that in any way. Like, you can't forget that. Number two, you're talking about a disposition. The disposition is disordered, but it's not in itself sinful. There's no evidence that it can be changed. And we could fight all day about whether you're born with it or it's Maybelline, but the innate versus acquired debate is not a fight I have a dog in, because even the Catechism says its psychological genesis is largely unknown.
Right.
So I'm okay with either, as long as you don't believe we're choosing it. And then number three, you have the acts. And the acts are chosen, sinful, gravely sinful, and if done with full knowledge and full consent, constitute a mortal sin. So I find it useful to use same-sex attraction for the disposition, and homosexual acts, impermissible acts, sodomy, whatever label you want to use for the behavior. So it's important for me to talk about those things, because I feel like conflating them is sort of a trick on both the far left and the far right.
Exactly. Right.
If attraction implies behavior, then either on the right, a same-sex attracted person can't live a holy life, can't be chaste.
Right. Could never be a saint.
Nothing to do with them. They're just damned. And then on the left, if attraction implies behavior, then how dare you, tell these people they can't engage in this behavior.
Right.
We have to accept the behavior because we accept the disposition.
Right.
And both of those things are terribly wrong. And that's why I think that language is important to use.
So thank you so much for coming on this show. It's been a delight talking to you. I could talk to you for 3 more hours, but I'm not Matt Fradd, so
yeah, this is not the best.
Not Pines with Aquinas.
or the Matt Walsh show.
No, Joe Rogan's here. Just you and me and Jesus. So thank you so much for coming on. And
blessings to have met you.
It's wonderful. God bless, and best of luck in your move to your next stage of life here.
Thank you. Have a great day.